Hello.
Hello, Nina.
Hello, Paul. How are you?
Here we are.
And the legendary Paul Nelson.
Oh, no, his son. Are you in Arlington, Virginia?
I am.
Now, I don't ask many POPO folks this, but what do you do for a living?
I work for the State Department.
And give us an idea of what as much as you can.
Parameters.
Yes.
So I am what's called in the bureaucratic nomenclature an FSO, a Foreign Service Officer. In other countries with simpler languages, it's called a diplomat. So most of my time I spend in the US embassies overseas representing United States. And we rotate every 2 to 3 years. We change assignments. They don't let us stay for too long. I am sort of in the general communications and cultural exchange sphere of activity. So I have worked on things like Fulbright program. I have done arts exchanges. I've worked on the international writing program at the University of Iowa, not to be confused with the writing workshop. That's where we send foreign writers to Iowa. And occasionally I also work on communications that are not in the humanities. So right now I'm in the group that does biotechnology communications. Yeah.
And what's it going to take to steal you from the Foreign Service and have you be a POPO ambassador? Just name your price.
You know, ambassadors usually make political contributions to political campaigns. Since you're offering to do it the other way around, I'll be happy to. That is the fastest I'm going to get to the ambassador rank anywhere. But you have to call me a special envoy.
I'm going to write this down. I better take notes. Special envoy Nina Murray, special POPO envoy.
Excellent. Right. That's a little secret. As special envoys, you can make anybody an envoy.
And really. Where have you been stationed?
So my very first tour was in the country of Lithuania, and it's a hidden gem. Recommend highly. Vilnius is the capital. I learned Lithuanian language for that. I still speak it. It was amazing. My second tour was in Toronto. My third tour was in Moscow. And if people are starting to think that I just chase cold weather, it's somewhat true. Then I came back to Washington to work in the Educational Cultural Affairs Bureau, where I led arts exchanges. And I am still here. My job is technically in DC, but I'm probably going to be doing it from overseas as soon as travel opens up. Yep.
So you don't know where your next POPO address is going to be?
That is very true, yes.
I see. So, but it's probably going to cost $1.25 to get you a card.
Excellent point that I was hoping would come up. The diplomatic posts, much like our military stationed overseas, has a separate mail system. So when you're mailing, kind of like if you're mailing to a military base, it goes on the same rate as United States. And so the address is just funny. It's a bunch of acronyms, so it looks like a military address, but it doesn't cost you anything extra, which is a big selling point for me when I was in the business of collecting books for libraries overseas and asking people to donate books for me. That makes a big difference, of course. And then if that doesn't work, there is a special address. That's the diplomatic pouch. But you have to know people to know what that is. But basically, if I'm in and I'm overseas, there will be a special address.
Fantastic. And you were hoping that would come up, so you might have been hoping other things came up. So you might have some things to get off your chest.
That's very nice of you to ask, but no, the book donation was my other big pitch, because so everywhere around the world, and people can look this up online, there's an office called American Spaces. And it's a network of libraries, more than 600 of them, that United States, the State Department operates in various ways. Sometimes it's partnerships, so we don't technically operate them. Sometimes they're inside embassies. And, you know, Paul, being overseas, that's a lifeline, because you don't have, you realize how valuable our local libraries in the United States are and how extensive our collections are. It's really amazing. And so everywhere I went, in Moscow and in Vilnius, where that was part of my job, I tried to solicit donations pretty heavily. I remember I had like a tarot flyer, you know, here is an address, you know, send us books. So if anybody is interested in sending books overseas to our posts, and this can be anywhere. Of course, right now we don't have sort of foot traffic into these centers, but things will open up, and they're huge. I mean, in some places it's the only place for people to practice English, it's the only place to encounter American literature, and they're always hungry for information. So of course, you know, that when I call my books, there's a big box that ends up going to, you know, spin the dial wherever my friends are, wherever I have a friend at the moment. And I send them literature, just fiction, nonfiction, good things to read, because otherwise, how are people going to get it? Books matter.
So how does one get you a book or several books? To your address in Arlington, Virginia?
Yeah, you can do that if you have a bigger box and you're willing to pay money. Then I mean, just for shipping, I can find you the address, depending on where if you have a particular country in mind, I can go track it down, or otherwise we'll just, you know, look at what books there are and see where we can send them.
I would love if you could create a post. Give me a couple of paragraphs and a couple of images, and I'll put it on the POPO website, and we'll put it out to our list.
Yeah, that's a great idea. I will do that.
We would really like to have people from overseas, and people of color, and indigenous communities, and representatives of the gay and lesbian community more involved in the fest. And we don't really have a budget for outreach. We're doing this on a shoestring, but eventually we see many, 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 many people doing this fest and acting as a foreign service for peace of our own, sort of a postcard Peace Corps.
Yes, that's wonderful. So I'll turn it around. If you want to give me a couple paragraphs about kind of what it is and looking for PayPals or something like that, I'll run it to my colleagues and see if I can find any interest in our American Spaces Network.
That's fantastic.
I mean, they can publish, I mean, if they pick it up, they'll publish it online. And, you know, think of it as both kind of a pitch to collaborate, but also think of it as a newsletter type of story, because we also have various publications where this would be something potentially interesting to write and say, here's a group of people in Seattle that are self-organizing or whatever. They're not just in Seattle, you know.
Well, we're based here, but we've been doing it internationally for 15 years. So yeah, it'll be 15 come 2021, and registration is open. So how did you find out about the fest?
I'm not sure. I think it was listed on, there's a blog out of the United Kingdom run by a writer who collects calls for proposals. It's called Kathy's Comps and Calls. I had interviewed Kathy for my own blog, and she mentioned that she runs this kind of community service. So I subscribed to hers, and I think it may have been listed there, but I'm not sure. I try to stay abreast of various calls for submissions and whatnot, but I love postcards. And when I saw that there is a combination of the two, I thought I just had to try it.
How many years have you been doing it?
This is my first year. 2020 was the first year.
Wow. And so tell us about the postcards, the actual postcards that you send out. There has been a move myself included, to create our own postcards, which is a whole nother dimension, and which I encourage people to investigate. And sometimes I get a little snotty, and I call cards that are not homemade store-bought cards.
Aww.
I know. It's a personal, it's a bad trait. I understand that. However, I buy so many postcards. I could show you the drawer full of 400 postcards, including old ones that have writing on them, all kinds of art cards. I'm kind of a postcard slut. I'll be honest. I'll just say that. However, someone like you, who's in the Foreign Service, who speaks, I'm guessing, several languages. Oh my God, tell us about how you get postcards.
Well, there is rarely a postcard that I can resist. And let me just give me 1 second. And there are some places that, so, when we define handmade, it's, I have, for example, well, this is not from overseas. This is from the very, from the exotic location of, sorry, I'm married. Exotic location of Nebraska. This is a friend of mine, takes pictures of her garden and prints them on postcards. But this is from a Russian museum, because I like horses, so I buy everything that has a horse on them.
What city in Russia?
I got this, I think, just at the Darwin Museum in State Darwin Museum in Moscow, because they have a Darwin Museum. And let me see here. I want to show you. This is just from my travels to Zurich, just a lovely medieval site. This, curiously, I mean, it doesn't look like much, but this is from my hometown in Lviv, Ukraine. And this is the building where my mother lives. So somebody, we didn't, know about this. Somebody just decided that it was card worthy. And an artist went out and did this rendering, and then I saw it in the store. How about that? But there are also beautiful things like this. Ukrainians love their ethnic dress. So they do, they've done a series like that. So I just get them everywhere I go. And then, as you can see, they're still in the box, because you have to be fairly special to get one of them. In the United States, I find that postcards are the instant gratification kind of fix when you go thrift shopping. And in particular, here in Arlington, we have one thrift shop that benefits a local hospice service, and their cards are 5 cents each. So you can imagine you need to come over and check it out.
I think you just put it on my bucket list. 5-cent postcards. Are you kidding me?
It's amazing.
And I love that poetry is just flowing from you. To call an image card worthy, I've never heard that before, and I love that. I'm going to have to use that.
Okay.
Yeah.
You're welcome to it.
Wow, just so much that is just blowing my mind. So when you saw the call for the Postcard Fest, I mean, what went through your mind?
I thought it was fascinating, and I didn't quite know what to expect, other than people would be writing on postcards. I was very attracted by the idea of people making their own postcards. And I'll tell you, it's because I have, of course, I hang out with a lot of artists, and to me, it's interesting. I'm always interested in how artists can use small forms to promote themselves. And of course, poets have the worst time promoting themselves because it's hard to get people to read poetry. And so the combination of a small piece of art with a small piece of another art was fascinating to see how that would work. Out of that came out, I have an artist friend who has been printing postcards of her work for this reason, so that she can give them away, because if somebody cannot buy a painting, she still wants them to have something. And they're wonderful, but of course she has nothing on the back side, and she's been after me to do collaborations of some kind. We haven't figured it out yet, but we're working on it. Not to mention the fact that there is that ekphrastic relationship sometimes with the image in the card. And I didn't I think I got one or two that were like that. I wrote one poem that was inspired by the image on the card that I received. I don't think I did any that were, I have a greater distance between mine, but you know, I like the serendipity of finding cards that would fit, sort of fit the poem, and maybe have another life. I'll show you. I'm not making my own cards yet because I'm not there yet. But I did repurpose a couple of cards that I received. This was a beautiful one of Rhode Island, and I've gotten this, and we had this, just the graphics were so standout. So I put another card behind it for this propaganda kind of feel, you know, like the Obama poster. And then this one is a bit of a picture of a tree. And so I hope that, you know, maybe when somebody gets my cards, they can cut them out and repurpose them into another card.
Yeah. No, don't talk about cutting up your cards. That's postcard suicide or homicide. You know, it's interesting when you said propaganda and you likened it to the Obama poster, the famous Shepard Fairey, right? One of the propaganda before you said Obama, I thought was the Russian Revolution propaganda, because there's a similar feel to it, isn't there?
It did, because it just happened at the time when there was so much interest in new graphics and new arts. It was kind of the shape that futurism and cubism took in that culture. And so it's amazing. There were you go to museums in Russia and you look at tableware made during that time, and serving sets. And the art is just astonishing. It's really something.
And the link to futurism, absolutely right in line with that whole era. Just a beautiful call on that one. Tell us about how the Postcard Fest complements your own poetry practice, if it does.
It did. It was a great way to spend the month. It just put me into that mind state of mind where you're looking for things to write. And I think I cheat a little bit because I I regularly have a dose of novelty and alienation in my life by moving regularly. So I started a regular practice when I was in Toronto, but I was kind of on and off even before that. I was writing. And then in Moscow, I had a regular practice just to keep myself sane, and kind of made that determination. It has been harder to maintain in the States just because there's so much more poetry around. Many things have been written about, and so you feel like I feel like I don't have ideas or new things to say. So the postcard challenge just kind of brought me to the ground, and that fact of having to produce something every day excused me from having to filter my ideas, first of all, because there's no good or bad ideas. You just kind of work with whatever is. Right. And so some of the stuff that I started or sort of jotted down ended up longer and more evolved. I had to cheat like once or twice and have a folded postcard because it didn't fit, because I just kept carrying on. But there were also a lot of very short pieces and kind of Twitter jokes and things like that, things that become poetry once you put line breaks in it and put it in the card.
The best Twitter joke I've seen in a long time was Elaine Boozler, who called President Trump the Manchurian cantaloupe. I know, that's professional comedy.
Oh man, that is high grade.
I thought that was. Take us through the process of you writing somebody a postcard poem during the fest.
So I have a love affair, among other things, other stationery items like postcards. I love graph paper because I'm a child of the Soviet Union, and when we grew up, we had different notebooks for different subjects. And if it was math, it was graph. And it was penmanship, then it was slanted. There were slanted lines to get you to write, which is why I can tell oral people who were educated in the old world or somewhere else, but they're slanted handwriting. Or sometimes it's the indication that the person had to study Russian. It does do things to your handwriting, to your cursive. So I carry one of these around with me all the time, and everything goes into the book. So at some point during the day, I would look up or rather I would just sort of try to go through the day with an eye towards catching a line or an image or whatnot. And then, I mean, it kind of depends. Like I was traveling for a bit during that time, so I had cards with me and I would just write on them. But typically it goes into the book because I have to longhand it, and I hate to cross things out or have anything like that. And then it goes on the card, usually the same day. Just sometimes the book is closer to me than I am to the card. Right. Yeah, so I had the address list taped inside the book, and I had the dates on each name to make sure. Yeah, exactly like that. Yep. To make sure I didn't miss a day. Yeah, keep track of it.
You know how to do this.
I guess.
You sound like a postcard veteran after 1 year. That's amazing. And bringing such knowledge of art movements of the past. That's fantastic. You know, I hadn't thought about that angle on the handwriting for a long, long time, but I guess Chicago must be the old world as well, because that's where I grew up. And I remember writing on an angle and penmanship classes. And once, I think in 4th grade, once I had my penmanship assignment on the wall. It was only once.
Wow. Well, Chicago, of course, is, you know, the 3rd largest or the 2nd largest, insert an Eastern European nation, city in the world after the capital in London.
That's yes. In fact, more Polish people in Chicago than any other city but Warsaw. A large Ukrainian population, Ukrainian village on Chicago Avenue. Yes.
An enormous Lithuanian community.
That's right. That's right.
Yep. Yeah. So it's definitely, so it must be rubbing off.
That's probably true. I think that's more true than you think. What are the things you really love about POPO? You haven't talked about receiving of cards, but did that live up to your expectations? And what are the things you love about the project?
As some other people said in your interviews, you know, I love getting things in the mail that are not junk or bills, right? So I got some beautiful cards with some fantastic poems. I got one from Canada. There was somebody from Canada on my list, which was wonderful because it just took me back to Canada. So I'm keeping this one definitely as it is. It was just exciting to get cards and to see, it just brightens your day, you know, it just takes you out of your routine to read something that somebody sent you and to look also at the physicality of the handwriting. It's interesting. Some people, you know, keep it very organized and straight within that field that's available. And some people write all over the card. The address barely fits. You know, just interesting. It's such a. Again, you know, I grew up in the child of the Soviet Union, so when I was in 6th, 7th grade, there were all these pen pal programs that was the way that you could communicate with school children from other countries. And that was like a way to find out what they were doing or whatnot. And I remember I had a PayPal from Poland, and I think there was a German program that we had set up. It was also a way you were supposed to practice your foreign languages. And of course, you couldn't say very much in that language you were practicing. You were like, I am in 6th grade. I live in, you know. But it was a window to the world. And I think that kind of sense of wonder has persisted. The cards give us that. And now from inside the State Department, we don't work on this very much. But the whole concept of the fact that the world agrees on sticking a stamp on a piece of paper and it'll get you to wherever it is going, the International Postal Union Thankfully, I'm not in that portfolio because it's very complicated. And there's a lot of work that goes into that.
I imagine, though, that you get all kinds of stamps.
I do. I used to have a stamp collection. And as a stamp collector, kind of look at them as their own pieces. But yes, and when I'm overseas, I usually have two Christmas lists. Like one goes to the United States, and one is local. But I will send things through the regular mail just so I can put regular stamps on it from wherever.
So you must be a stamp aficionado. So when you go to the post office, do you probably get a lot of stamps? And if you're like me, you put regular stamps on postcards. Do you do that?
I do. I did. Well, first of all, the post office doesn't carry the postcard stamps necessarily all the time. And so I eventually ordered them I figured out how to do it online because I'm such a Luddite. But yes, stamps are important.
Do you like the Bugs Bunny stamps?
I did like the Bugs Bunny stamps. Yeah. But I also like the Harlem Renaissance stamps. Post office ours has been doing a really good job. Yeah. I had actually a whole bunch of them were innovations. So I had the biotech and the nanotech and artificial intelligence stamps. Those were awesome. They're gone, by the way. They're gone.
It's probably so. I have not seen them, but I think postcards themselves are an artificial intelligence, but that's a whole nother discussion.
That's an interesting thing. Yeah.
You living in Canada and not being a native to either Canada or the United States, what are the differences between Canadians and people from Estados Unidos?
I'm afraid I can't comment on that. This is going to be public, right?
That's a state secret.
Yes, definitely. Well, how about this? When I was in Canada, I wrote poems a lot, and they came out in a chapbook that's called Minimize Considered. And if that sounds a little odd, you have to get the chapbook to get the explanation. All right, I'll give you the explanation. So State Department communicates by cable, which used to be telegrams, right? That's how we used to communicate. It's now not a telegram, but some of the conventions of it being a telegram persist. And so one of them is at the end of the telegram, you usually will see the phrase minimize considered. What that means is that there are places in the world that are on minimize status. There's nobody manning that telegraph ribbon, right? There's nobody there. They've had to do something. So you put it down to indicate that, yes, you have thought about who's not going to receive. You've thought about who is not going to receive the message. So to me as a poet, this inherent consideration of where the message is not going in the message itself makes a lot of sense. So I put it in a book.
That is so classic.
That is a book of my Canadian poems. So there's a lot of snow and there's a lot of border, what we'll call border noir. But it's a fascinating place. The northern border of the United States does not get enough press. It's just, well, you guys know it because you're up there in Seattle. I was on the Toronto's kind of New York, New Hampshire, New England kind of side, which is really has its own feel and culture.
Yeah. Speaking of feel, you alluded to the sort of heightened state during the Postcard Fest. So hard to discuss, hard to talk about, but a feeling that poetry is a little higher priority between the time you get your list and the time that you send your last card out. Can you talk a little bit about that and how that feels? Because you joined during the pandemic year, it was a little different. It's usually associated with warm temperatures, but tell us about how you experience that feeling.
It's an interesting question. I was just reading a paper on cognitive habits that are associated with better well-being, and heightened awareness is one of them, of everything. So contemplative practices like meditation that encourage and train focus and heighten awareness of sensation are beneficial because they train this awareness state, and then it triggers a whole biochemical reaction and yada, yada, yada. So I think POPO recreates in a way, it is like a meditation. I don't know if anybody sets aside that time to write one continuous piece, but I could see how that would be something that somebody would experiment with. Because you have measurable chunks to focus on. You have a physical measure of, this much to do, which also focuses the mind. But then in order to fill that, I think you have to make yourself receptive to ideas and just a little more sensitive. So something that might kind of go in one ear and out the other on a regular day, when you have 30 poems to write, you don't necessarily discard the thought or a feeling or a sensation or a line or an image or a pine cone or a feather. This being COVID, there are a lot of poems about plants because that's what we're looking at. Right? We don't, less with personal interaction, but a lot about plants. And weather and birds. And, I'm suddenly interested in the behavior of crows because I really would like to understand what they're talking about at 4:30 every day. I have a murderer that lives across the street, and I feel great kinship with them by now.
Are the crows there digging up turf looking for bugs?
They're not.
The crows here will tear up a whole lawn. They will, and you go by later in the afternoon, and it'll be as if someone had sort of rototilled the lawn. It's quite remarkable, and that's.
We have enough trash cans that these guys are pretty lazy. There you go.
That's just the easy one. In fact, a starling was about to jump on our table today. We were eating outside in December in Seattle, which is a rare feat, but we enjoyed our gyros and spanakopita, and the starling knew that we were enjoying it and wanted a piece of that. I think there's one last question, and that is, let's say you encounter a person through your travels from a place like Kiev or Riga, and maybe they have a little English, maybe they have a little poetry, and they hear about the Postcard Fest, or they see this interview and they connect with you, and they say, "What can you tell me about the Postcard Fest? Why would I want to join such a thing?" What would you tell them?
That's a great question. I think you get a month's worth of new pen pals, right? You think about, as adults, how often in the course of your life you meet new people. It's one of the hardest things to maintain in today's lives. An intentional meeting of another person over a shared project. That's rare. That's not something that comes very easily. And regardless of what comes out in your own work, it will reverberate in your life. Just the sense of connection. That was the second of the 4 keys to well-being, is the sense of connection to other people. This is ready-made. And I think it's worth for that purpose. Just people have talked about sort of the effect of opening yourself to, or sending your work to 30 strangers. I don't necessarily feel like they're strangers, because we're all connected by this idea. So we're all doing the same thing in a way, therefore there's already something in common. And that sense of having something in common with people you don't know is in itself beneficial, and as you say, an act of peace and goodwill.
Do you have a postcard poem of your own you'd like to share?
I do. Okay, well, let's see. I have not read this one out loud before. That is one thing about future technologies. Let's see if we can make this audio as well. Not sure how that would go, but do you remember, do you guys have those? That there were maybe late 80s, there were audio postcards. You would record your message somehow, and then when the person opened it. There was like a little thing in them, the battery powered or something, and the person would open them and it would play your message.
I know of cards that play goofy music or say things, but having your own message, that would be something. And I mean, if you could install your postcard poem in there, that'd be fantastic.
That's what I'm saying. So I'm not quite there yet, not an engineer. But since we have been on this whole northern border topic, one of the things that happened to me while I was in Toronto is I fell in love with Buffalo, because that's the other side of the bridge. And it's a fantastic place. So I wrote a poem called American Gothic. I must have had a card from Buffalo or gotten a card from Buffalo. So here goes. I've been to Buffalo. I remember the winds, how they wrapped themselves around the brick spires like forlorn cats, the sky in solid shades of pewter, the timelessness, the grandeur, the railway girdle around it, the grassy ring of nuns' flat tombstones. I remember I thought that I could love it.
Pewter skies. Buffalo, what a place. Have you ever been to the Special Collections Library at SUNY Buffalo?
I have not.
It's
No.
really amazing. Or the Knox Albright Gallery. These are places I've heard of because they have a Clifford Still collection at that gallery. But Buffalo, I already had a sense, even though I've never been there, I already had a sense from your poem. Beautiful. You know, it's a real delight to have you in this community. I just loved being able to engage you, and I'm glad we finally got it done. And thank you for being part of this community.
Well, thank you so much for having me. And let's continue talking. I will, as promised, write something, and please write something to me. I'll go register for the next year. And, you know, hashtag thrift shopping. That's where the cards are. If I can, there's also, if you look it up, hashtag thrifted style. And I am one of those people who are not on Facebook, but I am on Instagram. So if folks go looking for me, that's where I dwell.
See, that's more proof of your intelligence right there. A Facebook.
I was just never adopted.
Please don't get me started. I'm not gonna get started. We're going to end on a beautiful note with huge gratitude for your being part of this community and for your time today.
Thank you. Thank you. It's been my pleasure.